All right. I want to hear your thoughts on this. So, in some ways, it is representative of the American dream, right? If we see the American dream a certain way. So, in what ways could they sort of be an example of how you can achieve the American dream? Cooper?
So you look at him, he kind of just had the orange orchards or whatever, and then now he's one of the wealthiest people. He is the leader of the timeshare industry.
Yeah.
And that shows it, but it also shows the dark side of the American dream that also comes with the absurd amounts of wealth, the gold digging, the influence that's either good or bad depending on how you use it. It just shows both sides once you get.
Okay, so it's an example of how people achieve the American dream, but maybe going back to a few maybe class periods ago when we were saying, is the American dream then something that we should admire? It might show that in some ways that kind of upward mobility and that focus on upward mobility might not be so admirable. That's kind of the dark side then. But that guy, you're saying, like, that guy had something small and then he worked to get something big. So this is an example of them that American dream. Ben?
I think that the American dream, he accomplished the American dream in a sense because he did what he set out to achieve.
Yeah.
And now that he's not have that dream anymore to achieve much, that's when it becomes a threat almost.
What do you mean?
Because he could use that in ways that he wouldn't have done if he was still dreaming for something.
So a threat to then, like, the country, his society? Or a threat to himself?
Threat to himself and to others. Like, he could stop someone else from achieving their dream and not care because he doesn't have his dream.
Got it. So it's kind of like this idea that once someone does achieve the American dream, it's not like they stop there in this upward mobility trajectory, right? And because it requires some kind of competition, some people have to be on top and some people have to be on bottom, his goal becomes stopping other people from maybe achieving that dream. Okay, tell me a little bit about her. Is she achieving the American dream? Maddie?
I just wanted to go back to the admirer goal. Back to her especially because it just shows that the American dream is kind of shallow in reality. She wouldn't have gone to where she was without looks, and she probably wouldn't have married him if he didn't have all that money. He wouldn't get that party.
Good. So there's then a little bit of luck involved in being in the right place at the right time and looking the right way. But then there's shallowness involved because it doesn't seem like her goal is that admirable to marry a rich man and get rich. Okay. So?
Yeah, no, she, at least the way that she described it, she grew up in a worse scenario than a lot of us did.
Yeah.
And that just shows you how biased America is because it's just because she had a good face and then she made herself have a good body afterwards.
Yeah.
And that is how she was able to get so high so fast.
Okay, so it's about, like, then aesthetic appeal. It's about surface levels, literally.
So,
the surface of the body is going to be what gets you success.
They have to be the ones that make companies.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so with like the woman though, if we think of her, so she was working at IBM, right? I want to think a little bit maybe more fairly about her. Maybe not more fairly, but complicated a little. Like, she's working at IBM. She's like, you know what? This isn't making me happy. So she becomes a model. Is being a model an example? Like, if you became successful as a model, is that an example of the American dream? Is that a legitimate, like, career field to go? Okay, so
I think it's a harder one. Like, I don't think you can say anybody can be a model.
It's kind of like saying I want to be an NBA player.
So it's like you could try, but maybe you won't be successful. Okay, but she tries and she becomes successful. So this is her sort of like, well, a semi kind of successful. So this is her growth, capitalizing on what she has to get more, right? And then she's like, okay, then through this model gig, I can get a rich husband, and then I can kind of capitalize on that to become even higher up, right? So she's using her body from the time she starts to become a model. Is there something different between using her body to get model work and using her body to get a rich husband? Or are those kind of just the same?
No, I think
those are different. Okay, why?
Why?
Yeah.
She's kind of working, I think, as a model, but she was going to, I don't know.
She has to work, right, to be appealing to the guy. She has to work to find the right guy. But even now, she's got to work because she has 8 children. It's a lot of children, and like so many dogs. Okay.
Is she raising her children?
I don't know, but is he?
Or she raising his dog.
Like, is he working at the timeshare company really anymore?
No.
You know, so it's kind of like, I just don't want to be unfair to her because she used looks, whereas he used this orange girl that
I'm
he
only
had.
being unfair to her because she's a gold digger.
Mm.
She like when she was saying like, oh, like when you saw him, what attracted you? She paused and she's like, it was that money that he adored me.
Yeah, right. Right. And but then what does he do?
That adored her. Yeah, right.
Right. I love what he says though too. He's like, I don't know what she sees in me. It's like, really, dude? Do you not know what she sees in you? Like, yeah, are his intentions any less noble than hers? I don't know. Maddie, you might end up to Christina.
Just to like kind of stop the fashion train.
Yeah.
It was sort of admirable that she could just quit her like 9-to-5 job and just go. Like went to New York.
She is extremely ambitious, isn't she? Her ambition led her to an avenue that we're not respecting, but she was ambitious and she did achieve her goals. Christiana.
I kind of want to think about their relationship a little. Like, there's 30 years between them. Like, is that even a healthy relationship at all?
I don't know. Can it not be?
It can't.
Is age not just a number?
The moment she
That's
said
not something you want to
yesterday by Ivor was the moment I was like, whoa.
Yeah, the movie's rated PG. So just
movie's PG.
Yeah, this movie's PG.
She's like,
yeah, but she's never uncovered. She's working with what she got, so she's not uncovered. But yeah, that part is. I think maybe I should cut that out next time.
no, it's funny.
Okay, but okay. So in some ways, then they're living this idea of an American dream. Then I think they're working with what they have to be recognized according to their abilities and achievements. In what way is it not then an example of American dream, Anya?
I think that they're just missing like authenticity at like that. They're married to people for like their material wealth or like their looks, and they have all these kids that they're not really raising with the other thing. I don't know. I think that it's a really shallow version of happiness, and I think that if everyone in America were to strive for that, it would not just be like a disaster.
Okay, so we go back to this idea of an American dream has to be this pursuit of happiness. And if we are only recognizing happiness as the monetary kind of social mobility, then they are not achieving this kind of happiness. Maddie?
Like think about it in a bigger, but if you take into consideration other like poor kids, especially girls that are growing up, I feel like it gives like false expectations and kind of a bad example of it all.
Okay, good.
And then maybe they'll think, oh well, I'm in a bad situation now, but maybe if I go marry a rich guy or like maybe if I go model, it just like gives false expectations.
Yeah, so when we watch this, we do judge them, don't we? We're laughing at them, I think. I don't think we're laughing with them. I know we're not laughing with them, but I do think they're kind of ridiculously funny.
I feel bad for the guy and I'm laughing at him.
You feel bad for him? He made his choices too, right?
I don't know. I mean, I feel bad for him in the extent where I feel like he thinks that he's in a relationship.
Oh, potentially. He's so delusional that he's like, I'm 75 and she's 30 years younger than me, but she loves me. Okay, maybe. But wait, where was I going with that? This idea that it's like not an admirable goal then, right? Like, lost it. Nathan, tell me what you were going to say.
I was just saying that I think it depends once again on how you look at the American dream, because if you look at it as that kind of monetary value and like you can move up in or you have good social mobility and you can move up, I think then it does fit. But if we look at like that first definition that we talked about, where it's like, especially with the whole success of the community kind of thing.
Yes.
I feel like that is very like individual focused rather than the American dream when it talks about the success of an entire community.
Okay, good. It's everyone gets an opportunity to achieve success, right? And we look at this couple and we think not everyone has access to the opportunities that they have access to. So for example, that could be just how she looks and the fact that she was born the way that she looks. Although, I mean, honestly, is she that hot? I think she's working with what she got. I think any of us could I think any of you girls, if you want to marry someone 30 years older than you, don't let anyone tell you you can't. But like she's kind of like working with her sexuality, right? He has this orange grove, which he doesn't talk about where he got that orange grove. His father gave him the orange grove, and he also had the capital to start a timeshare business, right? So he comes from money. It's not all on his own initiative. And so this shows us that it's this individualistic pursuit. And the only way they see this as a way of securing their money is by selling these timeshares to poorer people, right? People who kind of can afford it, but more often can't really afford it. So they have to be taking capital from other people, and you can argue like those timeshare people know what they're getting into, but they have to take capital from other people in order to boost themselves up, right? Now I remember what we were going to say though. We're all judging them and we're seeing them as very surface level, very silly, very ridiculous. So have they really then gone up in social standing? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. What makes these guys different from like Rockefellers, or these days the Kennedys, or the Waltons, or the Koch brothers? What makes these, Koch brothers maybe, but what makes these guys different than those other families? Not the Kardashians. I think the Kardashians are up here with these guys.
I don't think the rest of them had a house with 30 bathrooms.
Okay, so it's the excess of wealth, right? Now, there are people like the Rockefellers or like the Waltons. They have estates. Like they have houses in, who's the family that has a house in Asheville? Oh, I can't remember their name. They have houses where like there are no outlets. You can't just drive up and see the house. It's not like they're in a neighborhood that's hidden away. They have staff that takes care of them. They have private jets and all of that. But do we see it? Not so much. It's like this private little sector of the country, right, that we don't actually think about that much. So what makes the difference between these people and those people is maybe this idea that they have 30 bathrooms, but also that they're making a documentary to show you that they have 30 bathrooms. Luke? They're so public about it, yeah. And there's a feeling here that they're not quite as good as other people, even though they might have more money than other people. There's new money versus old money, right? Have you heard of this idea? Old money has to go back generations, 4 or 5 generations. Usually people will say it has to have happened before World War II. New money is the people who, they start with maybe a small amount, like an orange grove, like some capital, and then they can build it up to be like 30 bathrooms, building the biggest house in America. Who do we seem to respect more in our country? It's complicated these days.
There's not a lot of like public figures that feel like that are still like super high public with old money. I feel like the new money people are the celebrities, and that's the people that we know.
Yeah, exactly. They're the ones that are on the surface, right? And yet, don't we kind of make tabloids about them, and we make fun of them, and we make these documentaries and laugh at them, or we make reality TV shows that they're a part of, like the Kardashians.
Someone like a documentary about The Rock, and then you're like, dang, I want to be rich. But then you watch a video like that, and you're like, dang, I'm okay that I'm middle class.
I don't really want to be like that. I see who I'm thinking of is the reason that it's quite complicated too is the Trumps. The Trumps complicate this entire conversation because we are in the process of sort of like rethinking the idea of new money and old money. Trump is kind of old money. His grandfather made money in brothels in Canada. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, the Trumps come from prostitution money. So that's how it started. And it was technically right around this time period that would make them old money. And yet the way that the Trumps behave in 2020, it feels like more like new money, like everything's gold plated, everything is very conspicuous, right? And there seems to be like a lot of admiration for the way that Trump spends money in a lot of like circles. There's something very cool about the fact that he is conspicuously spending, which complicates this whole discussion. But if we're thinking about Gatsby, we think about the difference between new money and old money, and the difference is really stark. So let's actually go to that section. Let's look at some Gatsby stuff here. Let's look at page 5. Okay, if you're ahead, if you've read it before, don't give anything away. We just found out about Gatsby's connection to Daisy. That's about where we are. All right, so there's two communities. They are both ridiculously rich. In fact, West Egg people, the celebrities, might be more rich than the East Egg people. They might have like more capital to throw around, actually. They might have more money in their bank accounts and safes, right? So it says, I lived at West Egg. West Egg, that's where Nick is, that's where Gatsby is. Well, the less fashionable of the two. Though this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. So when we say fashionable, when Nick says fashionable, what does he mean that it's less fashionable? Yeah.
They're nice houses, but they're nothing compared to the mansions on the east side.
Okay, good. So it might be about like the presentation of it. Yeah. Have you guys heard the term McMansion?
Sounds like McDonald's.
Yeah.
A McMansion is like a grotesque house that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, either because they're adding on to it or because they started it this way because the person who wants to own this house wants everything. So it's not committed to a certain architectural style. It's not coherent. Which one?
Oh, the documentary, we just kept
Yes.
wanting to add one more thing.
Yes, exactly. That's a McMansion. So it's just like, it's not colonial, it's not Tudor, it's not modernist, it's just kind of everything. And because it's everything, we kind of look at it as a bit trashy. We're just like, even if it's really big and rich and whatever, we're like, that's not fashionable. It's trash. It doesn't show any kind of taste. Yeah, Ben.
I think one of the big differences between old and new is that the old people aren't fake, really. They do stuff how they like it, and they have their stuff in a good way. That they just appreciate it, and they take what they've earned,
Yeah.
and they use it for themselves. And the new money kind of is a fake. They're doing it just for display, kind of.
Yeah, it feels like the new money then is more insecure in their money. It's like, no one's gonna know I have money unless I spend it all, and I need people to know that I'm a rich one. I am one of the best people here. And then the old money, it's just like, well, everyone knows I'm a Johnson, like from Johnson & Johnson. Everyone knows I'm rich. I can behave how I want to behave. They can afford not to spend money. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's a weird thing to say, but yeah, so this less fashionable idea, it means that it's like less tasteful is how we should read this. So West Egg is less tasteful, though this is a most superficial tag. So he's like, that's just like the way that we view things. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. My house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between two huge places that rented for $12,000 or $15,000 a season. So this less fashionable place is still like busting at the seams with money. The one on my right was a colossal affair. Tell me about that word colossal. What kind of tone does colossal have? What kind of connotations?
It's just wow, it's like mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowingly big, yes. What else does colossal have? Is it big in a good way or a bad way? It's a colossal house. Any idea about connotations of that word? Would you want your house to be called colossal? It's a negative word. It sounds monstrous, being colossal. It's like, it's over the top. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy. That goes back to what Ben was saying. It seems fake, right? It's an imitation of something else. Same with Queen of Versailles. It's an imitation of the real wealth, the Versailles. Let's see, with a tower on one side, spanking new under a thin beard of raw ivy. Spanking new has that kind of stink on it too, kind of like colossal. Being spanking new is not a good thing. Let's see, and a marble swimming pool and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion. So this is Gatsby's colossal affair, and this is how Nick is judging that colossal affair. Or rather, as I didn't know Mr. Gatsby, it was a mansion inhabited by a gentleman of that name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore and it had been overlooked. So I had a view of the water, a partial view of my neighbor's lawn, and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. Tell me about that, the consoling proximity of millionaires. It's a great phrase. Yeah, Nathan.
I guess it's kind of saying he has like, kind of like we were saying, or like they were saying with the hotel rooms, where it's like, it makes him feel rich because he's in, like, he's surrounded by all these
Yeah.
rich people, so it makes him feel like he's one of them.
Yes, I think that's probably it. You feel comforting. You feel like you belong to it, and you don't have to spend all the money. You don't have to actually participate in it. Have you guys ever watched that show? It's on Netflix called Idiot Abroad. Oh, it's great. It's Ricky Gervais's buddy who hates to travel. So it's a comedy show. He hates traveling, and they send him to all these places that are like really hard to get to, just to like annoy him and see what his response is. And he goes to Petra, which is like these like built into the wall palaces and houses. They're ancient, and they ask him where he'd like to live, and he chooses this little hole in the wall. Like it's nothing. It's just a little cave, right? And he's like, I'd like to live there. Because he's like, then I wouldn't have to do anything to maintain it. But every time I woke up, I could look out the cave entrance and there's a mansion across the street. So like I get to enjoy what the mansion looks like, but I don't have to keep it clean. Is basically this argument. Yeah. It's kind of that idea. You get to enjoy the millionaires.
You don't live there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I would love if like I still had my house because it's already too big to clean. I just had my bungalow, but then everybody around me was super wealthy. That'd be awesome. I'd love that. Like,
real estate and buy a trash house.
yeah.
It's like barely big enough to live in, and just like imagine like looking at your neighbors just driving by in their like Mercedes.
And you just get to enjoy the Mercedes, the aesthetic appeal of the Mercedes.
Like, what are you doing?
They might be judging me, right? But if they're being neighborly, they're gonna invite me to their cool parties. I get to like watch movies on their projectors. I get to eat their, charcuterie boards or whatever the rich people do. Huh?
It's like, why buy a boat? We don't have friends who have a boat.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's what Nick's doing here. Nick's from money, so he could afford to live probably on East Egg, the fashionable place. But instead, he's gonna live over here on West Egg and kind of like enjoy the view. See what happens. Carson, what were you gonna say?
Oh, you said it.
Oh shoot. Sorry. You want the charcuterie boards too? Is that what you were gonna say?
Pretty much.
Okay. Okay, so then let's compare this then to East Egg. Across the Courtesy Bay, the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water. And the history of the summer really begins on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. So tell me about the word choice just in that little introduction to East Egg.
It sounds very like, I don't know, it just like sounds much higher, I guess, because it's like talking about how it's glittering.
Yeah. The glittering of it feels actually rich instead of just fake superficial rich, right? Glitter compared to colossal. How about the fact that the palaces are white? Have you noticed how often white is thrown around in this book? Why is that important? What does white usually signify as a color?
Well, of course it's racist.
It's racist for sure, and Tom is a huge racist, and he definitely takes this association to heart. If we're not thinking about race, what does white usually imply? Cleanliness, innocence, a purity, right? Yes, and it's okay because you have people for that. Let's look at the first time we see, let's go a little bit down. So he explains their relationship. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter for reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he'd brought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they came east, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason and then drifted here and there unrestfully wherever people played polo and were rich together. This was a permanent move, said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever seeking, a little wistfully, for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. So first of all, tell me about this idea of them drifting and moving. Why does that seem to be a sign of great wealth? Cooper, and then to Luke.
You're not just tied to one place. You can just be like, oh, I'll go here now.
All right, good. So it kind of like is a freedom that you can only have if you have money. Luke, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'll say something. It's like, they're so rich, they like, because most people, like, they buy a house and stay there for like 10 to 15 years. Because they can't do that. But they're just fine. Yeah, I'll just move in, I guess, whatever.
Yeah, my rich friend left, so, and they're going to France, so I think I'd like to try France. Yeah, Emmeline.
Especially the use of the word drifted,
Mm-hmm.
makes it seem more carefree.
Yes.
Like, very spur of the moment kind of thing, and less of a extreme plan.
Yeah. Good word for it. And I think that's the positive side of things, right? That you're carefree, that you can act at the spur of the moment. What would be the negative way of saying that same idea? Okay, so you don't have any goals, you don't have any progress. Carefree, what's the opposite of carefree? No, that's not the question I meant to ask. Here's what bothers me about the fact that they're drifting around. They haven't made any connections that are important to them. Like, they can go from place to place. They don't have to worry about it. It's not like for instance, I don't want to move because my best friend lives like a half a block away, and I would feel guilty leaving my best friend. And we've been best friends for 20 years, and so I'd never want to leave her, right? I've got connections to this place. I have family connections to this place. I don't want to just be flighty and go around sort of living my life because I have people I care for here. And they are like, well, wherever there's polo and rich people, you know. Now, Tom is spending a lot of money, right? And Nick seems to be judging him for this, but he seems to be judging Tom differently than he judges Gatsby. What's the difference between the kind of disdain Nick might have for the colossal house versus what Tom is doing? Yeah.
Because he kind of knows Tom, and Gatsby's just still kind of an unknown at this point.
Maybe, yeah, that might be why. I mean, Tom is awful. Here's what I think it centers on Tom's awfulness too. He's forever seeking the turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. Tom is like the kind of guy who
He's like Uncle Rico.
Yes. Like he's like thinks that he's still like living out. He's looking for his glory days that he already passed him by in high school or college. And that seems to be, not to Nick, it's not a sign of his immorality the same way the colossal house is. Gatsby's, spending is an immoral thing. It's like, oh, it's so gross. It's so putting it in your face, right? But Tom's is more like embarrassing, like just settle down type of a thing. And you look, this idea of movement and settling continues throughout. Like, look on page 8. When he first sees Daisy and Jordan, the scene is amazing. The only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which 2 young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. So you've got this giant piece of furniture, a sign of wealth, right? That they can afford this piece of furniture. But because they can afford this big piece of furniture, they get to drift around. So money enables their movement. And it's like the wind is coming through the windows and their dresses are just like flopping. It's such a great image. And he says they were both in white and their dresses were rippling and fluttering as if they had just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. I must have stood for a few moments listening to the whip and snap of the curtains and the groan of a picture on the wall. Then there was a boom, and Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows, and the caught wind died out of the room. So, but when we first see them, they're just like moving around, and it's kind of to avoid this idea of just staying in place. When you stay in place, you're going to have to confront things you don't want to confront. So just keep drifting. Don't worry about the fact that you don't have goals. Just go with the flow. Let's compare this to what Gatsby's house looks like then in the party scene. Go to page 40. It's so much. At least once a fortnight, a corps of caterers came down with several hundred feet of canvas and enough colored lights to make a Christmas tree of Gatsby's enormous garden. On buffet tables, garnished and glistening hors d'oeuvres, spiced baked hams crowded against salads of harlequin designs and pastry pigs and turkeys bewitched to a dark gold. In the main hall, a bar with a real brass rail was set up and stocked with gins and liquors and with cordials so long forgotten. Remember, it's illegal at this time as well, that most of his female guests were too young to know one from the other. By 7 o'clock, the orchestra has arrived. No thin 5-piece affair, but a whole pit full of oboes and trombones and saxophones and viols and cornets and piccolos and low and high drums. The last swimmers have come in from the beach now and are dressing upstairs. The cars from New York are parked 5 deep in the drive, and already the halls and salons and verandas are gaudy. What does gaudy mean?
it means like I don't want to say like not presentable.
Yeah, it's because it's tacky.
Yeah.
It's excessively tacky with primary colors. So not white, but primary colors. And hair shorn in strange new ways, so flapper girls. And shawls beyond the dreams of Castile. The bars in full swing and floating rounds of cocktails permeate the garden outside until the air is alive with chatter and laughter and casual innuendo and introductions forgotten on the spot and enthusiastic meetings between women who never knew each other's names. All right, what's the tone that Nick takes towards this party? Yeah.
Kind of that same kind of thing he was saying where the mansion is like colossal. It's kind of like he's saying it's like filthy rich, you know, like it's rich to a point where it's like too much and it's just almost disgusting.
I love that word, filthy rich. Yeah, it's disdainful of this money. Yeah, Ellie.
I think he was saying kind of overwhelmed by it, just how like grand it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's just come from a house where the guy bought an entire polo set, like all these horses, and he came from extreme money, and here he is now over to Gatsby's house, and it's another example of extreme money, but because of the way Gatsby's spending that money, it's filthy, and it's overwhelming. Which party would you like to go to? Would you like to go have dinner at Tom and Daisy's house, or would you like to go to this party at Gatsby's house? Gatsby. Like, I think that the answer for most people is like, I gotta see this crazy party, right? Once in my life. I'm an introvert, but like, I've gotta try out this party, you know? There's something very appealing about it. And we see in chapter 4 how he just lists the names of everybody who goes to this party. And Nick goes to the party and he seems to have a grand old time, would you say? Like, he has a great time. He's talking to people, he's getting drunk, he meets Gatsby. Gatsby smiles at him and he like, you know, swoons. It's an awesome time. And yet here he is criticizing it. So what does that tell us then about this relationship between new money and old money? Yeah, Luke?
I think like people with old money hate people with new money. So a lot of the times like how people get old money is like hard work and like based on the American dream, but like new money, like someone wants to say earlier, like lots of celebrities and like lots of young people have new money and they just blow it all on like super extravagant things that like and old money are kind of like, oh, you have no taste, like you don't deserve it.
Okay. Yeah, let me ask you guys this. You don't have to raise your hand or anything, but just think inside your head, how many of your parents are kind of wealthy? We live in a neighborhood where it's like half and half, kind of, right? Is that kind of fair for Harriman? I'm not really sure.
I mean, there's like 3 sections. There's like, yeah, I'm completely generalizing.
Yeah, we're generalizing.
There's like the apartments and the townhomes, and there's the suburban area, and then there's up on the mountain where it is really wealthy.
Okay. So
which kind of got cut out of here.
Okay, so I'm gonna reveal, I am from a wealthy family. We were not wealthy when I was growing up until about high school, and then my dad sold his business and retired at like 50, maybe he's like 48. He was young. He's in nursing homes. If you guys want the key to wealth, nursing homes, there's always going to be old people and no one's going to ever want them around. Anyway, he owned nursing homes and hospice care and stuff like that. He sold the company and now it's crazy. I don't know how much they are worth technically. I'm always recording when I reveal too much about stuff. I don't know how much they're worth. I do know that my brother the other day saw a check for $70,000. Just a check sitting on a side table. Like, I don't understand how that's possible. Exactly, right? So they own like business complexes now. So it's just like rent from these business complexes come in. They own a horse ranch. They don't ride horses. My dad just bought a plane a couple weeks ago. It's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous.
Is he a pilot?
He's learning now. My brother went into the Air Force, and my brother's going to become a pilot. And so my dad was like, "Well, I can't let my son show me up, so I have to become a pilot too." So technically, they're new money. because my grandparents were middle class pretty solidly. My grandpa was an engineer, but pretty solidly middle class. And my parents then are kind of this new money, but I would never say that my dad didn't work for what he got. Like, he went to college, became a physical therapist. He got his PhD, almost got his PhD. So like, he was working really hard to get there. And then he had a big stroke of luck. He met the right people at the right time and could get into the business he got into. But I wouldn't say that it wasn't like a YouTube star where someone just like stumbled across him in a second video, right?
It seems like it took him a couple of decades to get that money.
Yeah.
But it's not like Charlie D'Amelio or like
some random YouTuber.
Oh, I don't know who's Charlie D'Amelio. Is it? Oh, okay.
She's like
16.
She's
She's
16.
gonna make more money than most of us will in our lives.
Okay.
You know what's
Yeah,
annoying?
like-
She's not even that attractive.
She really is.
There's so many better.
Isn't that annoying when girls get famous and they're not attractive?
She was the girl that I would see in school and I wouldn't be afraid to talk to her.
That's probably why that's part of why she got famous then, right?
No,
that's a bad thing.
Sorry. I forgot about Good one. All right, so let me then ask you. So if your parents are kind of not maybe in the situation of my parents, but like, he got a nice house, they maybe came from middle class and now they're upper class. Like, would you say your parents worked for their money? Like,
yes.
would you say then that then they'd be qualified then as new money if they came from not wealth, like if it wasn't like the Huntsmans where it was like passed down, right?
How much money do they have to make for you to consider them wealthy?
For me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. $100,000.
Because like my parents could only be supposed to be considered wealthy.
Yeah, I don't know how my husband and I were actually talking about this the other day. I don't know where you draw the lines for middle class, upper middle class.
Isn't
Yeah.
like wealthy 300,000 plus?
Yeah. That sounds right. Here's what I decided ultimately. I was like, I think if you come from money, we call you wealthy. Like the Huntsmans are wealthy.
Yeah.
I think if you're like my parents, you're rich, and maybe you're filthy rich. And I want to put a stake on it. Rich,
Richer.
You can tell I'm bitter. I don't get any of this money. And then if you are making $300,000 a year, it's like your upper class. And then there's an upper middle class and a middle class and a lower middle, and it kind of like goes down like that, right? But what I want to get at is like, who do we admire more in our culture? Ultimately, this is the question I'm asking. Do we admire the wealthy more? Do we admire the rich more? Do we admire the upper class more? Like, where does our respect lie? Because we watch these guys, right? And I wouldn't say any of us admired them. Did anyone admire Jackie and David? I think we judge them and we're like, ugh, gross, tacky,
That dog on the piano actually.
Yeah. Actually, that made me think that's what I got to do with Marty. That's my dog. Yeah, that was really gross. Okay, so there's certain things that they do that it's just like, it's so ridiculous, right? And we decide, okay, we don't admire them. But we do still admire families like the Huntsman family quite a lot. Like, they're kind of Utah heroes, even though they have giant houses and they spend a lot of money. And there's these different like levels of admiration, right? And what I want you to think about, we don't need to answer this yet. Is our admiration of the American dream aligned with who we admire most in our country? Do we admire most the people who demonstrate the American dream to its like fullest capacity? Or do we admire a different subset of people and in which situations? So that's something that I want you to keep thinking about as we read this book and as we read the way that Nick judges Gatsby's parties while he super enjoys participating in these parties. And the way that Nick is like, he's such a gross kind of tacky person at the same time as I absolutely love him and enjoy when he smiles at me, because it feels like I am now special. Okay, so I want to kind of leave that discussion there and we will get back to that, but let's get back to argument writing because we haven't talked about that in a little while. So pull out your American Dream packets. all of this gets us to questions about the American dream that I think could make for very good arguments.
What would you consider Jeff Bezos?
I don't think he doesn't come from money, does he?
No, he did not come from a lot of
No, but it's a different thing. Yeah, it's a different thing when they get into billionaire status with Bezos, with Musk, and with
Musk past Bezos.
like Bill
He's got like
Gates.
200.
I think us is more likable.
Yeah,
See,
Musk is definitely better
Elon
than
Musk,
Bezos.
Gen Z love Elon Musk.
Bezos is
There's
supposed to
a
be a
difference.
trillionaire.
There's some what will we call there's some other term to refer to these American self-made billionaires. Yeah. Yes, there's one right up here. You can grab.
I think Musk is a lot more socially aware than like.
Yeah. So it's not wealthy and it's not rich. It's like something else, isn't it? Or is it rich
He's
still?
kind of just like being Iron Man. He's just like, I feel like with Bezos, the goal was to make money, but Elon, it's just like, I'm gonna build a car, I'm gonna build a rocket. Money comes with that. I don't know.
Interesting.
I feel like there's a side of that, and it's just I don't know, it
Interesting.
seems unreal.
Because that's another thing to add to our argument here.
Yeah, sorry.
That's another thing to add is like, is that the person that we admire the
Yeah.
most? The self-made billionaire? Is that the American epitome of the American dream, right? Okay, open up to Thomas Jefferson to James Madison. It's page 11.
Not yet, no. That's another kind of thought. That's not how it's thought.
Okay, this is like a diary entry of when Thomas Jefferson was traveling through France. So I want you to just read this quietly to yourself. Some of the language is archaic, so difficult, but go for it. Wait, you guys know what we're doing? We're reading this Thomas Jefferson
11 and 12.
on page 11 and 12, yeah? Read. Okay. You didn't know that Jefferson was a Bernie bro, did you? Turns out a little bit. So what does he see as the problem with the French aristocracy? Yeah.
There's a lot of poor people that are willing to work, but they don't have the opportunity.
Yeah, good. So it's kind of like this pyramid, right, of wealth. And it's like the more money you put up here, the bigger the pyramid has to get down here. And he talks about how it goes, like it's unemployed down here, it's laborers right here, and moves up to merchants and so on. But if they have more money, then that has to come from somewhere else. So it's coming from here, right, to kind of feed the rich. And as he sees the inequality growing, he starts to see this as a problem that government can solve. So what are his solutions for government solving this problem of wealth inequality? Was Jefferson propose in this piece? Yeah, Ben.
Distribution of land.
Yeah, distribution of land. So this is going against what's called an entail. Has anyone read Pride and Prejudice or seen the movie? You know how Mrs. Bennet is so mad because Mr. Bennet has to pass on his wealth to Mr. Collins. That's what's called an entail. It's a succession of inheritance that is not determined by the people who own the land. It's determined by the first person to ever build up that wealth. So, Rockefeller builds up an estate, and then we don't have entails in America, but he builds up the estate, and then he says, this will pass on to my oldest son in perpetuity. And what Jefferson is saying is, no, let's do it so that you have to divide up the wealth between family members. So like I have 5 siblings, and we each get a piece of the pie. I can't wait till my parents die. Not really, not at all. They're only 20 years older than me, so I'm never seeing that wealth. And they run Ironmans, so they're gonna outlive me for sure. But there's 5 kids, right? And so divide that 5 ways, and yes, there's still inequality. There's still plenty of money, but it's gonna be spread out a little bit more. So that's one of his plans. What's another plan that he has to help people out to avoid this kind of inequality in America? What about taxes? What does he say about taxes?
Get rid of them to a certain point.
Yeah, so don't tax the poor, don't tax these guys, and then what does he say about the rich? Tax them a lot, basically. Right here, he says, I have 2 versions of this. Or no, I don't have 2 versions. I have two copies, and I've written on both of them. So it says, another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt all from taxation below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise. So he's talking about how you should tax the wealthy quite a lot and you shouldn't tax the poor, right? That's why I say he's kind of like a Bernie bro. And then his other thing is that you give everyone land. Because if you spread out the land and you give everybody this land that they can cultivate, then they are going to be able to kind of make their own way. It was called the agrarian ideal. That's what Jefferson loved. Okay, so this breaks up the aristocracy, and then everybody gets this chance to live the American dream. It sounds great. Well, there's this guy named de Tocqueville, and I want you to go to the gray pages in the back of the book. Go to the 1988 question number 1. I didn't number these pages. Is it the last one? Yeah, it's the last page. All right. Now, de Tocqueville is kind of writing in response to America. He came over here, this French guy, he tours America, and he's like, it's cool, but I've got some issues with democracy. So this is him explaining why it might be good to have an aristocracy. Jefferson explained why it would be bad. Here's de Tocqueville explaining why it might be good. So I want you to read this excerpt now in the box, the stuff in the box. I shouldn't put how rich my parents are on YouTube, huh?
Probably.
I'm gonna get my identity stolen.
Yep.
Okay, okay. Who needs more time? Raise your hand if you need more time. What does de Tocqueville see as maybe the drawbacks? Let's start with this. What does he see as the benefits of aristocracy? And this is for everyone, not just the rich people, but also the poor people. Yeah, Isaac.
It says that it helps you like remember your ancestors and know where you came from.
Okay, good. So it gives you a better sense of history then, and a better sense of belonging, because you're like, my ancestors kind of, my ancestors did this, they did this in America, and so, you know, we have to respect them, but then we also have to respect country. You know, it kind of creates a kind of patriotism there. What else does it do, Ben?
It makes people happy with their current living situation. And they always want more.
Okay, good. So if there's not something that, like, if you can't jump out of one class position to another, then he's saying you'll just be more satisfied with than the position that you are in, right? You're going to accept that. You're going to live your life to the best of your abilities within that and not always be reaching for more. Okay, what else does he say? What does he say about the connections between people in an aristocracy? Like the connections between the rich and the poor? Yeah, Eli?
He talks about how like people be more likely to sacrifice themselves for others.
Yeah.
They essentially like take away all hope. So then you're just like, well, yeah, sure, I'll do this for my neighbor. On like democracy, you have hope to improve your well-being.
Yeah, good. In a democracy, there's got to be this kind of competition between neighbors that in an aristocracy, de Tocqueville doesn't see. You might envy your neighbor, but you're not going to try and compete with your neighbor. And he says, look in the middle of the first paragraph. He says, as in aristocratic communities, all the citizens occupy fixed positions, one above another. The result is that each of them always sees a man above himself whose patronage is necessary to him, because he has more, so you need to rely on him for some things. And below himself, another man whose cooperation he may claim. So I need some help building my fence. I can go for this guy. I need, some rock for my fence. I can go and ask this guy if I can get the rock off his land. Right, and so it creates this connection between classes. And he says democracy doesn't do that because it creates this assumption or this idea that your destiny is in your hands. And de Tocqueville is claiming that is just an idea that is not necessarily true. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You have all this blank space right here. I want you to decide. This prompt asks you how true that is. It says, read the following passage carefully, then write an essay evaluation of de Tocqueville's assertions about democracy and aristocracy, and his conclusion that democracy throws man back forever upon himself alone. So this was from the AP test, 1988. If you had been around in 88, you would have had to read this and respond to this one. So we're going to just write the thesis statement for this. And remember, we're working on enthymemes. So a claim, and then a reason your claim is true. So, do you think that his conclusion about democracy, that it isolates people and makes you rely upon yourself only, do you think that is true? Why or why not? So, write the thesis statement just in this blank spot underneath. when you finish writing it, I want you now to write it again, and I want you to keep the same idea, but try and play with the word choices here, because when we write something by hand the first time, it's just like a lot of times a mess, right? So you're going to try and rewrite that thesis, make it even better. It doesn't have to be a new idea. It's just playing with, what's going to sound the best, the way you've written it. You're trying to perfect it. Okay, we're gonna pause there. I'm gonna cut you off. We're going to look at those with fresh eyes when we come back, because sometimes you pause for a while, you come back, you realize what to make better about that thesis. To wrap things up, I'll just tell you that documentary was made in 2007. What happened in 2008 that's gonna be so upsetting to these seagulls? Do you remember? Yeah, the housing crisis, right? So they've got giant loans on this giant house that is completely unsellable after 2008. They are still building that house. They didn't lose the house. They lost almost all the business, but he's been able to build up quite a bit of it. And they said the house was going to be done in 2019. It's still not done. No updates on when it's going to be done at this point. But you can follow their progress if you want to. Your homework for next time, I haven't made your schedules yet. Your homework for next time is to read Gatsby 5 and 6 and respond to it, and that will be built and ready to go on Canvas by the end of the day. So, what was that? I haven't worked it out exactly, but I'm saying to plan on having it done by February 1st. Yeah, that's a great question. The book that you chose, either of Mice and Men, The Things They Carried, or Their Eyes Were Watching God, have that finished by February 1st. We might start talking about them a little bit after that, but making you do it early, I guess.
Do you need to annotate those ones?
Nope, you don't need to annotate them. No, there will be a response assignment to go with that. Okay, anyone have any questions? Let's clean the desk then.
Hey, Dr. Boris, is there anything new going on besides like late work?
I'm not prepared for that question. I don't. No, there isn't, because that argument essay you wrote about the American Dream goes on third quarter. So it's up to date except for late work. When your desk is clean, you can go.
You don't know what I'm doing.
These tests got very close together.
Nathan there? He said yes. Can you tell him I love him? Okay, so. I'll let you know if you need it. You never sprayed my desk.
Yeah, she did.
What? I'm sitting here like, what the heck?
I was stealthy.
My bad. I'm also blind, so. Probably.